We're now live. And I should switch from Kyle because I'm always talking with Kyle. I have her
your main
thing. Yeah. There. Now it's me, which is not nearly as much fun for me to look at.
Nah.
Yeah.
It's rough. I know.
It is. But we make do. So where are we all? There's everybody's here. All right. So any questions from last week's talk before we leap into this one? Anything that has come to mind, or I left out, or I added and it doesn't make sense? Any of that stuff?
That was just me.
Okay. All right.
So yes.
No questions.
No questions? All right.
No questions? All right then. So the seventh precept is called Nigah Dasht, which for the people who want the Persian is N-I-G-A-H, first word. Second word, D-A-S-H-T, which means watchfulness or attentiveness. This is often considered of the 9 precepts, this is often considered the really difficult one. On the Enneagram, this would be, you've just hit 5. You've hit the dark night of the soul with this one. This is the one that is going to give you the worst of the worst hard times. And that is because the whole purpose of this is for you to be so attentive that you catch every time your mind wanders. There's a word that we use, khawatir. It's a Sufi technical term which you don't really need to know, but it means a random thought or feeling that occurs in the mind and heart in a completely mechanical way, and it must be disempowered. Literally disempowered is a negative and distracting influence. I say disempowered because you need to take the energy back from it. So as I'm sitting here and I'm talking to you, things might be going through your mind that are not about the talk, or even more important, not about you being present for the talk. So let's take a moment here and check in with yourself and ask yourself, am I awake or am I asleep? Am I absent or am I present? Are you here right now? Or are you in a dream? Which is it? And of course, as you look, you're awake, right? You notice that. For that one moment, the voices turn off and you go, oh, here I am. Now, the moment you notice that, things rise up to distract you from it. The dog is barking outside. All the things will distract you. Somebody give me some of their most favorite distractions. Dave, you have a favorite distraction.
I sure do. I have plenty of them. Often to do with things I am trying to put together conceptually. They just kind of turn around in the mind, and if I don't watch, they pull me away. So that's the flavor of what quite often does this. Yeah.
Yeah. My distractions will be, it will depend on how I'm feeling. If I'm feeling very relaxed, my distractions will be, oh, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this other thing. I need to start this project. I need to do that project. I start something and I get distracted by something else. That should sound familiar to those of you who are looking at the Enneagram class right now. So that is my my relaxed place. I will start doing too much and switch from thing to thing in the middle of each thing. So there is never an end to the things. There are always more things. Kyle is laughing because she's seen me do this.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Then if I'm stressed, it's a whole different set of distractions. If I'm stressed, it's like, oh my God, am I doing this right? Am I completely screwing up? Here I am supposed to be this teacher figure. Am I guiding these people, or am I completely blowing it? She's also seen me do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So these are the things that I look out for, because the moment I see one of them, I know that the notions, that's the other name for the word that I mentioned, the notions are coming up in my mind. And they have only one purpose, which is to make me go back to sleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Nods. Aaron said he does that too in terms of, skipping from project to project.
Yeah.
And Ilmar asks, would needing to go take a pee count as a distraction or only mental stuff?
Yes.
I think you can make it into one.
You could make it into one, but needing to go pee can be either.
Mm-hmm.
It can be physical stuff. I mean, it's a reality. Bladders get full. Bladders require themselves to be emptied. Now, there is more discipline that can be applied than you think can be applied. And anybody who's ever gone through the EST training knows about that. I just dated myself, right?
Yeah, I don't know about that. What is that?
Okay, Earhart Seminars training. Yes, this is a thing that was very popular in the 70s. It was one of the first of the big self-help enlightenment groups. And one of the rules was when the meeting was in session, you could not leave the room for any reason.
Wow.
People actually sat in their chairs and peed their pants rather than leave because they were afraid to leave.
Lord.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I was thinking is if you use it as an excuse to get up and move.
Yeah. Or to get out of the room when you don't need to.
Yeah. Or nervous, having to go pee, that kind of thing.
Yeah, when biological functions come in, you have to really examine it from a number of different perspectives.
Yeah. Okay, so Nancy says, I've been wondering why I don't think about Tai Chi when I'm trying to plan meals.
Okay. Have you ever wondered why you don't think about dirigibles when you're trying to plan meals?
Yeah, do you want to say more about that, Nancy?
Yeah, I mean, the joke was that I do get distracted by planning meals when I do Tai Chi.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the old story about feeding the donkey. I have told some of you that, but I'm going to tell it to you again. This actually has to do with Ahmed al-Ghazali again. So his brother, Muhammad al-Ghazali, the great scholar, the person who was known as Muhyiddin, the proof of religion, the man who wrote the text entitled "The Incoherence of the Philosophers," thereby proving that Islamic theology was better than philosophy. He goes to his brother and goes, "Brother, everybody in Baghdad wants to pray behind me when I lead the prayer, but you don't. Why is that?" And Ahmed says to him, "Well, if you're leading the prayer, I will pray behind you." And so Juma prayer starts again. This is always around Juma prayer for some reason. Many things happen at Juma. And everything's going along. And then halfway through the prayer, Ahmed Al-Ghazali stands up, rolls up his prayer mat, goes over into a corner, and finishes the prayer by himself. Now his brother is shocked and horrified and insulted by this. And afterwards he comes up to him and says, "Why did you leave the prayer in the middle?" And Ahmed said, "Well, I was praying behind you as long as you were praying, but then you decided to go feed your donkey." And Muhammad realized that at that moment when his brother got up, he had started wondering whether or not he had fed his donkey. And that relates directly to this particular precept. The thought of feeding your donkey, or the thought of what are you going to do for dinner when you're doing Tai Chi, or any of those sorts of things, are going to be distractions to your path. Some are more subtle than others. Some of them feel so incredibly real when they come up, and yet they are still distractions. This is one of the reasons why there are certain activities that I like. Any of the martial practices, where you are actually contesting with another person. If I start thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner when I'm rapier fencing with somebody, I get stabbed every time. I cannot disappear from the match. Any of you who do any kind of, like Aaron does BJJ, he knows that if he's rolling with somebody and he starts thinking about what he wants for dinner, he's going to get pinned, going to get tapped out. It's going to suck. So,
we just have a question.
Yes.
Getting back to your mention of the text.
Oh, how did Averroes's peers feel about the rebuttal? Well, one of them wrote a rebuttal to this called "The Incoherence of the Incoherence." Mm. Yeah, it was a big fight going on, but it was a great fight. I loved that fight because so much good stuff came out of it, because you had these incredible geniuses on both sides passionately arguing for their position, and any mistake that either of them made, either side made, was caught by the other, and so they really had to polish their thought. And it was what in part helped create the Islamic Golden Age, was this particular contention between these two groups. And that's what gives us all of this philosophy and science and medicine and art and all of this good stuff that we enjoyed back then, that we don't enjoy now because nobody does that anymore. Alas.
Alas. Yeah, Aaron says in regard to being distracted, it's bad if it happens in competition, especially.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you, I made a hit on somebody that I should never have been able to touch, right? Just by catching him at the right moment and saying, "Oh, your shoe's untied." And he looked down. So I stabbed him. And I should not have been able to beat him. He was a much better fencer than me. But in that moment, he let himself become distracted, and I got the point.
Yeah, Nancy was asking, nobody does what anymore? And then Alex answered, philosophy, art, science. Yeah, thank you.
That stuff. Especially not in that way, where the disagreements produce higher order thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how when it works so well. I mean, I could see the look on his face through the mask when he felt my point hit him square in the middle of the chest. And it was like he looked up at me like, "You bastard."
The shoes untied trick, yeah.
Yeah.
Tisk tisk. All right.
So, the practice of attentiveness is twofold. First, one withdraws one's inner senses from the distracting objects. To explain this most clearly, I look to the Yoga Sutras, because this is the fifth limb of yoga, the withdrawal of the senses from the objects given to them to perceive. And that literally means when we say the senses, that means your feelings about. Let's say I see in my mind Mark, and he's scowling at me. I'm just sitting here imagining him scowling at me, and I'm having all of these feelings about him scowling at me. And Mark has never actually scowled at me that I know of, so I'm making this up entirely. But the first thing that I would do is notice the feelings in my body, the sense impressions that are brought up by looking at that expression. And I would literally work to withdraw those feelings from the expression, so the expression sits there without the feelings attached to them. This is the withdrawal of the senses, pulling my feelings back from the picture so that I can examine those objects given to my consciousness to perceive without the noise. Then, the second part would be to concentrate your attention within the awake state. This is where the watchfulness comes in, because what we're talking about here is literally constant vigilance. It's like you learn to watch yourself being awake. This is actually what Mr. Gurdjieff calls the creation of the magnetic center, or the watching eye. So there is the perceiver that is sitting there going, yep, awake, not talking, just noticing. And when you are absent, when you go away, you'll come back and go, oh, I was gone. We're going to get more to that week after next when we talk about the 9th principle. But for right now, know that is a very important part of this. And this is hard. This is an immense task in my experience. For me, doing this was the hardest thing that I had ever done. It was much harder than many of the other things, because it's like this grind that you're doing all the time, just being aware of your state, being aware of all of the things that jump in, trying to distract you, and turning away from them.
Yeah, Sean said, I've noticed about the distractions that most that capture my attention are usually related to the insecurities I'm working on.
Yeah, I would say, Sean, that is very accurate. Not just for you, but for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So, even though Dave says, I got given this by one of my teachers and it was also the hardest thing, but it really works. It does really work if you apply yourself to it.
That was Dave, by the way. Yeah.
That was Dave, yes. And yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road. You've done all of these things. You've done all of the other 6 practices before this to prepare you for this. And trust me on this, the distractions will come. And they will seem so real.
Yeah, they come 10,000 times per day. Yes, that is what it feels.
Yes.
Like, isn't it?
Yes.
And then Sean said, why is this so pernicious?
Because you spent your entire life practicing being distracted.
Mm. Especially these days. I mean, we talk about
Yeah.
technology sometimes and
Yeah.
how it can be both beneficial and, yeah, a huge, multifaceted, efficient distraction at all
Yeah.
times.
You want to find out how hard this is? Learn to tie your shoes a different way from the way you always tie them. And then for a month, only tie them the new way. See how many times you forget. See how hard it is to remind yourself, oh, I'm going to tie my shoes differently this time. Just try that. And then you'll know, I mean, with something as simple as that, the number of times that you will blow that one, it'll give you an idea. And it's something that we all go through. I mean, admittedly, I have probably the best, most clever, most brilliant students of anybody in the world. My students are the best. And each and every one of them goes through this. Every single one of them goes through this. I go through this. It is a task that never stops. It only gets easier. And it only gets easier after it gets harder.
Mm. Yep. Once you start really seeing this stuff come up, you're just like, oh my God, it's everywhere. All the time. Yep.
And it seems so real.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron says, it feels good to be distracted by things that we genuinely enjoy. Yes.
Yeah.
These do not have to be negative things. Yeah, as the Yoga Sutras keep pointing out, that you have 3 different choices of distraction, and they can be the positive, the negative, or the neutral. And all 3 of them are equally distracting. Mark says, I find that focus on breath is important to be attentive, to be the observer. Absolutely. This is why awareness of breath is the very first practice. Awareness of breath practice, is the first practice, not just in this path, but in virtually every path out there. In one way or the other, either explicitly or implicitly. And you go, oh, what about these primitive tribesmen over here? Are they doing elaborate breath practice? Let me suggest that you listen to them sing sometime. Or for those of you who live in Australia, listen to one of the Aboriginal peoples play the didgeridoo. You think he's not using breath practice? That's some impressive breath practice. Yeah, all of the church music of every kind of religion is all about teaching you how to breathe correctly. Gregorian chants, Hindu bhajans, all of that stuff. So, all of these steps, all the practice of awareness of breath, the watching your step, the solitude in the crowd, the whole 9 yards, it all leads to this and the next one, and the one after. This is a very step-by-step set of instructions on how to wake up.
Aaron, in regard to breath practice, says it's intrinsic of their habits. It's sort of why people think of them as traditional.
Yes. Yeah, people, so-called primitive peoples who are not in a lot of contact with cities or technological civilization and are not stressed out thereby, tend to have really interesting breathing. You don't see that so much anymore because we've killed almost all of them off. But for those few who are left, it gets very, very interesting.
So you're saying about the progression of the precepts?
Yes. So all of them are designed to get you to one point, and that is the point of complete, focused, awake state. And this is one of the last steps to it. This is the step where it was described by one of the masters of the path that this is taking your energy back from your imagination, because what creates the notions, the distractions, is imagination. And you slowly steal the energy back from your imagination to be used for your waking state, which doesn't mean you give up imagination. It doesn't mean that you can't use imagination for all of the things that it's actually good for, like creating new stuff or visualizing ideas or things like that, but you don't use it to distract yourself. Does that make sense? Good. So, if I say to, say, Kyle, for instance, all of the things that you have been imagining are what you use to distract yourself from the present moment. You know what she's going to do? She's going to imagine how she does that.
Yeah.
Okay, Alex is saying, breath, paying attention, non-judgment when you realize you were distracted. For me, bringing myself back to what it was right in front of me. So vision. This helps me observe the unfolding of the big mind and the feeling, the sense of the source. Sounds good to me. I couldn't say it any better. That's exactly correct. Who else do I need to pick on tonight? I picked on Mark, I picked on Dave, I picked on Kyle. We'll see. I probably need to pick on myself more.
Mark says, I also find the Buddhist practice of beginner's mind and Christian mystic practice of the cloud of forgetting helpful in emptying the mind of chatter. In other words, I know nothing ever.
Yeah. Mark, say something to us about the cloud of forgetting, because most people are not familiar with that term. This comes from medieval Christian practice.
Yes, about 14th century.
Yeah, thereabouts.
And it comes from the book from the unknown author called The Cloud of Unknowing. And one of the practices is when the mind has a thought enter into it, you simply enter into the cloud of forgetting, which is to ignore what's there by coming back to the present moment and being fully engaged in the present moment. So that itself is the way to forget anything, not only that's coming up in the present moment, but also from one's history, one's past.
Yeah, and this, when he says forget, he doesn't mean like wipe it from your mind. He means when the notions come up, to forget in such a way that you are not distracted from your task by the notions.
Alex says he relates to that and says, don't feed the story, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, that is a really good example. And we all feed the story. That is the nature of being stuck in unconsciousness, being trapped in the mechanical, is that we take the energy that we need for our own work and transformation and instead feed it to all of the mechanical stories that we love to use so much. And it sucks. And you end up having lots and lots of problems from it. You know what the biggest problem is? Nancy says, it's hard to maintain awareness practices even when they feel good. This is absolutely correct, Nancy. If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. I know that sounds very flippant, but it's actually true.
Mark says, the most difficult story to let go of is the story that I am a separate self.
Yes, that's one of the most difficult stories to let go of. This is the most difficult story for Mark to let go of, for sure. But I might have a different story that's harder for me to let go of. Kyle will have a different story that's harder for her to let go of. Dave is going to have an even different story from either of us. Depending on how our attention fixates, that will depend on which story becomes most important. So, let us think for a moment. What is the story that is hardest for us to let go of? I'll save mine for last because it's going to be worse than any of yours.
While people are thinking
what is
about
self-digestion?
Yeah. Sean.
Self-digestion or autolysis, spiritual autolysis. I love that phrase. It is where you eat all of your ego and digest it for the energy that it has withheld from you, and then use that to wake up. That's basically what it is. Nancy says, I actually find it reassuring that everyone has trouble with this. One of my tempting stories is that I am uniquely fucked up. Trust me on this, Nancy. We are all uniquely fucked up in exactly the same way. Yes. So, favorite stories. Kyle, you don't have to go first.
Good. Someone does, though.
Someone does. Well, Mark has given us his.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Sean says, I like to tell myself that I bring happiness into others' lives. Not true.
Okay, what you just said is not true. When we look at that, we see a complete generalization. So, Sean, have you ever made me happy? Think about it. Because I just sitting here, I can think of a dozen different times when you have brought happiness into my life.
Sean says, I did get you bologna one time.
Not just bologna, but homemade, handmade bologna from one of the best restaurants in Grand Rapids. This bologna was so good that it shouldn't have even been called bologna. Calling it bologna was an insult to it. Because we all know what bologna is with the Oscar Mayer stuff and all of that. This was sublime in what it was. So yes, there was that. How about, I don't want to embarrass you too much, but okay, Dave,
bye.
Take care. We will put the recording up by tomorrow morning, so there will be that.
So you're going to try not to embarrass Sean.
I was going to try not to embarrass Sean. I mean, there was a time when I really needed somebody to help me move a whole bunch of stuff. Who should be the person to do that but Sean, who was not only willing to do it, he was like over there virtually every day helping me move all of this stuff from one place to the other. He was like the one guy who stepped up and went, I'll help you. I mean, the number of things. So you see, Sean, my point in all of this is that it's not true is as much of a story as anything else, because it is too generalized. Sometimes you make you bring happiness to other people's. Sometimes you don't. That would be more true. But if you think you don't, or you think that that's not true, or you think it is true in the general sense, then you might be off kilter.
Does that make sense, Sean?
Actually, Nancy, knowing Sean as I do, I would say he tells himself that less than he actually does.
Mm-hmm.
Can the story be a question, or rather an area of inquiry? It could be. The story can be anything, but the story is always a description of what the feeling means. Of what the feeling needs, of what the feeling. Okay, so you have a feeling. All feelings are found in your body. If you tell yourself a story about what that feeling means, then you have the notion, then you have the object given to consciousness. Because all of the emotions, as opposed to the feelings, are stories connected with the feeling. I feel a fluttery sensation in my diaphragm, and I tell myself this means I'm afraid. But another person has the exact same feeling, and they tell themselves it means they're excited. Another person has the exact same feeling, and they tell themselves it means they're nauseous. The feeling is just the feeling. The story is what shapes a meaning around the feeling. Change the story, you change the meaning. Let the story go, and the energy all comes back to you. Why is that important? Kyle, tell me, why is it so important to regain this energy that you waste on telling yourself stories about how you feel?
Because it pushes you, it helps energize you through the process in, going around.
And what is the outcome of that?
Completing a process and increasing your energy even more from completing that process.
Yes. And as I have said, and as far as I can tell, this is as close to God's truth as I can get. You cannot change significantly or permanently unless your energy is above a certain threshold level. And for most people, most of the time, their energy is almost never above that level, because most of it is wasted in the ruminations of thought. It's wasted in the notions given to the mind to distract it. So as you begin to return, and I use energy for lack of a better term because I don't have a better term. This is actually not energy in the true sense, because at least so far I can't get it to move a needle. And if it doesn't move a needle, it's not real, if that makes sense. Can't be measured. I don't know how to measure it in the same way that I can measure electrical current or wind energy or heat energy or any of those things. I can measure those, so they're real. But I don't know how to measure this thing that I'm talking about except in its effects. But I know the effects are real, because if you reclaim this stuff that I'm calling energy for lack of a better name, then you can actually change yourself in permanent ways. Most specifically, you can change your imprints, and you can change yourself from a creature of habit and conditioning to a creature of awareness and awakeness.
I had a feeling someone was going to ask about imprints. David asks, what are imprints?
Imprints are points within the life of every human being where they are vulnerable to taking very deep impressions that come below the level of the conscious mind. Science has, you can read Conrad Lorenz to get a basic sense of what imprinting is like. He did his imprinting studies on animals, all of which take imprints. For instance, birds. When a duck is born, it imprints the first thing it sees as its mother, which is usually the mother duck, but sometimes is the Jeep or the golf ball, and that can lead to interesting problems. Human beings take imprints too, even though certain scientists have denied that human beings can take imprints. I think that that's like denying that we are related to the other great apes. You know, it is a egotistical notion. And each of these imprints affects us deeply. The first one happens shortly after birth. The second one happens between 1 and 2 years. The third one happens around the time a child begins to learn to speak. The fourth one happens at puberty. There are 8 all told. Only 4 of them are pretty much guaranteed to happen unless something physiological interrupts them. So that's an imprint. I've done some talks on those. You can go back through the archives and find them.
He says, gotcha. Seems like
Cool.
he understood. So we came here from talking about stories.
Talking about stories.
Yeah. I mean, I can say that one of mine is I have the notion that I am alone and unsupported, which isn't true, but it's often a narrative that plays in my head on a semi-regular basis, and it impacts my actions and the way that I encounter situations that happen in my life. So that's one of my stories.
Yep. And the conscious notion of that is relatively harmless. It's when it comes up unconsciously that it turns around and bites us on the ass.
Because when it's conscious, you can question it. You can notice it and push back against it. But when it sneaks up on you, yeah, like Mushtaq said, it can take you by surprise.
Yep. And that's when you get caught up in it. For me, my favorite notion is that I am inadequate to the task.
Mm.
And I can look at that consciously and go, wait a minute, I'm totally competent to do what I'm doing. But the unconscious sneaking up on part will completely disempower me if I don't catch it.
Yep.
Kyle has seen me go there because, yeah. For those of you who don't know Kyle, she is my oldest continuous student and my representative in all of this. So it's one of the reasons that I call on her so much, because she knows what I know now.
Getting there.
Getting there.
Yep.
She also has this thing about not being good enough.
I do.
Yeah, we are similar in
out.
that. Yes.
So that's us. Yeah.
That's us. Yeah. So what about you guys? You found one? You don't have to say. We don't.
Yeah, it might feel a little sensitive, and that's all right.
Yeah.
But it's just something to get you thinking and maybe uncovering.
Yeah, it actually doesn't matter if we know. What matters is for you to know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm missing Rania and Ahmed tonight, and
That's
they missed out
true.
on the stories.
They did.
Yeah, of course, it's asking a lot for them to get up at god awful o'clock in the morning in Cairo and show up here. So doing it 2 nights in a row.
That's true. Well, Nancy offers, one of mine is that I'm generally incompetent. Yeah, that's a painful one, huh?
Yeah. And yet you manage to find yourself here every week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're
So,
glad.
yeah, you're not doing so bad. But even if I say that, you're going to go, yeah, but there's this. All right. We're coming up on the final, the top of the hour is coming upon us very, very soon. So last questions.
Or comments
or you can tell a joke or anything.
Yeah, I mean, you can turn your mic on too.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Because if you don't talk, then I have to go into the commercial.
Mm.
And we don't want that because it's a commercial.
Oh, Alex says, so an easy thing that happens to me is that I'll get lost in the fantasy instead of taking conscious steps towards where I want to be. I have nowhere to be other than where I would like to. I have nowhere to be other than I would like to do something I love for a living. Any help on something like that?
Well, the first question I would ask is, what do you love that you want to do for a living?
And if it
Photography.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a hard one to break into, but it's not impossible. I have made a living as a photographer in a couple of different places. The first time I really made a living as a photographer was a group paid me in Grants Pass, Oregon, to spend a summer taking photographs of the wild section of the Rogue River. They actually paid me to spend my days hiking in some of the most beautiful, pristine wilderness in Southern Oregon. And people were looking at me as I was walking down the trail, laughing my ass off, wondering, is that a crazy man? And the other time was when I was living in Tanzania. I made a lot of my living there by doing wildlife photography and then turning it into graphics for different companies. So how clever are you at finding things like that you could do? Where is your niche?
He says, it's hard to know where to start and know you're capable and ready to charge people. Yeah. I've experienced that with editing too, you know.
Yep. And I have to tell you that Kyle is a superb editor. She really is. When you read my writing and it actually makes sense, it's her fault. And still she doubts herself sometimes. It's kind of sad.
I know.
Yes. So, have you ever sold a photograph?
And you don't have to type if it's easier, whichever you prefer to.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Not a photograph, but I've shot for a company when I was just beginning. That's awesome.
yeah. So, here is my suggestion to you. Put up a gallery on the internet somewhere of your work. Maybe just make a Facebook group and invite people to join it. I'd join it and show them your pictures and get feedback. Put up something new every week and then watch what happens.
Thanks. I was going to ask for real first steps.
That's the real first step.
Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can
You'll do two
it.
things. Yeah, you will, one, get people to see your work, two, get feedback. And that will do two things, because most of the feedback you get will be positive. Some of it will be negative, because no matter what you do, there are trolls. And that will make you hardened to the trolls. You will learn not to take them seriously and to recognize them when they come stomping through. You know, you can tell trolls because, you know, they're large, they're obnoxious, and they smell bad. They tend to drool a lot. There. So I am going to be looking for an invitation to this group sometime in the very, very near future.
Yeah, I'll join too.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts?
Sean says, Misashi says anything can be difficult in the beginning, but over time it will become easier. Yeah, I mean, that goes for pretty much everything we're talking about tonight.
Yep. Yeah, the practice of attentiveness, trust me, will be difficult in the beginning, and it does get easier. All right. Let me tell you about stuff that you can buy. The first thing that you can buy is the Ultimate Enneagram course. Yes, drills make skills. I like that. So the Ultimate Enneagram course, which is what started all of this, when my buddy Stephen Barnes managed to convince me to do this 6-week, 8-week seminar with him, which we did, and it was pretty darn good, if I do say so myself. If you don't have it, you can go to ultimateenneagram.com, which Kyle is probably typing in right now because she does that every week.
Working on it.
Yep. And you can buy a copy of it there, and it's really good. It is some of the best stuff out there on the Enneagram, if I do say so myself, and it's not about personality theory.
When I was talking about process and increasing energy by completing process, that's what I was talking about.
That's what this is about. Very, very shortly, Kyle, we are going to be offering the course that we did on the 3 forces and the 6 processes as an item for sale for the people who missed it. And this is also a very, very good course. And there will be more news about that very soon. The Enneagram course that we're doing now is halfway done, not even halfway done. We're only 3 points in. But it's going on. I would let people in because they can catch up on the videos. But that's going on. And last but not least, I am still running my special. We have a special. Everybody loves a bargain. Here's the bargain. Usually, if you want to talk to me, I charge $100 an hour, which is relatively inexpensive. It's much less than most people charge. And yet, if you really would like to find out what it's like to do the real work, which is always one-on-one, you can book 6 sessions with me at half price. So 6 sessions for $300 to be used at your discretion. And it's great fun. Most people get a lot out of it. I haven't had anybody complain terribly yet. There you have it. There's the commercials. And trust me, I dislike commercials as much as you do, and yet it's what oils the gears that make all of this work.
Yep.
So, any last thoughts or questions? Somebody's laughing back there. That's actually Kyle's housemates, I think, are partying down. Yeah.
We're doing kitchen things.
Kitchen things. I did kitchen things earlier, so I don't have to now. All right. Last questions. Last answers. All right, then I am going to tell you one last Nasruddin story. Mullah Nasruddin Hoja was invited to the royal palace for dinner with the Sultan. And during the meal, the Sultan leans over and asks Nasruddin if he is enjoying the stew, the khoresh. And Nasruddin replies, "Yes, it was fantastic." "Really?" says the Sultan. "I thought it was really terrible." "Yes," says Nasruddin, "you're right, it was quite awful." "Wait a minute," remarks the Sultan. "You just said that it was a fantastic khoresh just a few seconds ago." "That's correct," explained Nasruddin. But I live in and serve the king, not the stew. So bear that in mind. All right. So this is it. And ignore the man behind the curtain. And any last thoughts? Nope. Then I will say good night to all of you. Good night to all of you.
Good night.
Sleep well. Have good evenings. Kyle, hang out for a second. I want to do a quick check-in with you before we shut down for the night.
Sure. All right, everyone. Have a good evening or morning or wherever you're at. Just take good care, and we'll see you probably next week, hopefully.